thought I was going to become a CPA, but I don't want to become this person that I see that I'm working for.
And there are amazing firms out there. Yeah.
She's only 27. And I said, don't let what you see in front of you keep you from being the change that you know you can do.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode. I think we're into the 70s, actually, in terms of our episode count. Number 70-something of Strategy and the Virtual Controller. I am one of the co-hosts of the podcast, Damien Greathead. I'm sitting in Sydney, Australia. My co-host, Penny Breslin, sitting in San Diego, California. Penny, how are you today?
Okay, I left Wyoming, where it was minus 47 a couple weeks ago, and now I'm in Southern California, where it doesn't rain, but it does pour. So I'm actually living north of the ocean.
You have been saying flooding, yeah.
I went from Wyoming, minus 47, came over to San Diego, pouring, flooding rain, shutting down interstates, cliff falling down, the whole 9 yards. The surf area that we surf at, totally fenced off. Surfers try to jump over the fence. They built a bigger fence, and then I went to Tucson, where they were just getting over the flooding that had come from San Diego to Tucson, see my granddaughter. And now I'm back and I'm living in Lake Leucadia. I just went out to run an errand. Yeah. And they're going to shut down the road in front of my house here because of flooding.
Wow. Okay. Well, send care packages to Penny.
No, it's actually kind of nice. My dog hates it because he's a sheepdog. He's an Australian Shepherd, mixed Sheltie, and he's afraid of sheep and he's afraid of water. So
And afraid of rain.
He's a great big reason why you have to have
a bundle of joy.
Because he's not worth it.
And Penny, it's the 1st of February today that we're recording. This podcast will probably go live in the next 3, 4, 5 days. How's the office in terms of tax season ramping up, etc.? What's the latest on that before we get into today's episode?
Yeah, we're just finishing up all the 1099s and had a meeting last night, and the tax team is starting to get corporates. I think we're getting a few anyways already. Yep. They had been getting some from a well-run that just, man, I'll tell you.
Has their act together?
They have their shit together. And the quarterback that passes that football off to us, he's on top of everything. But they have 10 seats with us, and we've been working with them for quite a few years. But the other ones are starting to come in. Last night, they just started getting them. The corporates are happening.
And away we go. Another.
We go. So a little extra time for the bookkeepers now because they've cleaned up and closed out a lot of the books already. That stand-up meeting is getting a different emphasis. It's more tax stuff, but they decided to change up the stand-up meeting, and I got to see. I'm going to make them go back. And part of it is what we were discussing before is that they started 2 days ago pulling team leaders in one at a time rather than in a group. And I had a reason I wanted the team leaders in there in a group. Because their problems, their issues, and their tasks are the same. The individual nuances of every client and maybe the apps that they're using might be different, but their goals and the issues that they have with obtaining those goals tend to be the same. And they can share that holistic look of things a little bit better if the team leaders, you might be sitting there going, why am I listening to the problems with this team? I should get out with my own team. Well, open your ears because you might be hearing something that you need to take care of on your team too.
That will come your way in the next couple of weeks, or alternatively, that actually you might have experienced something recently.
You'll recognize, oh my God.
Yeah.
I have that problem too. And you might find that the 10 of you together could come up with a solution better than one-on-one.
Yeah, interesting. And so, folks, if you haven't heard that last episode, we talked about sort of some of the OpMecs coming into tax season and this idea of a daily stand-up. Quite often when we come to busy season, meetings are the first things to go. Like, do we really need to meet every day? But actually, the whole purpose of this is to share, to strategize together, and then move on with your day, and for everyone to be crystal clear on exactly what the day's priorities are. And if somebody's priorities have shifted, shifted, or if somebody's out of office, for example, the team can reallocate appropriately so that the firm delivers on the day's priorities. So go back and have a listen to that. And actually, it's sort of an interesting one. My guess is as we sort of segue to today's episode, where we're talking about symptoms versus causes and getting to the root cause of problems. Something I've noticed this week with myself and last week in our teams, we very quickly go into solution mode. We very quickly go, whereas I think, Penny, before we sort of started the recording of the episode, we were talking about your grandchild and who's 4 weeks old, Wyatt's 4 months old, coming up to 4 months old, and share that experience, because I think hopefully listeners will be like, oh shit, the same things actually happened with my family, or alternatively, it's happening in my business.
It's the baby was having problems gaining weight. In fact, she was losing weight in the first 2 weeks drastically due to inability to keep the food down. And my daughter had done quite a few things to help it. And I asked her, I said, one day, what are you eating? She goes, well, the same with Ember. I'm eating anything I want. And she goes, she really was bad last night. I said, what'd you have last night? She goes, pepperoni and meatball and sausage slice of pizza. And I went, did you ever think about that? And she goes, but I could eat that with Ember. And I said, this is a different baby. I said, I could eat anything with you, but with your brother, I could only eat oatmeal and buttered noodles, because otherwise I was going to have a crying, screaming, throw up baby. So
it isn't interesting. It's that third party looking in, because you arrived, you hadn't spent a lot of time, like one-on-one time, but you're in San Diego, they're in Arizona. And so very much this idea of this third party looking in to be like, hey, have you thought about this?
Yeah, well, when I got to the house, it was a 4-year-old, a 4-week-old going on 5 weeks, 2 parents in the house, one who's working because he works remotely. So one section of the house is all his office, and just day-to-day life. There's a dog, just normal stuff. And the baby was not calm, constantly cranky, constantly crying, constantly feeding. The doctors had told my daughter to constantly feed her because in order to get her milk production up, because the baby wasn't eating long enough times. And then the next day that I was there, my other granddaughter, the 4-year-old, went to daycare, and the house was quieter and calmer. I mentioned to Maggie, I went, wow, she's doing pretty well today. And Maggie goes, yeah, let's not jinx it. Let's just hope it stays the same. And then the following day, the older one's home from daycare. And Dad comes in and out of his office. He comes in every time he comes through the house. Hey, how's everything going? He's very loud. He's very boisterous kind of guy. And how the baby's doing? Gives everybody a hug and a kiss and all that. Yeah. And Ember's jumping around, and the baby's agitated, crying, pukey. And on the next day, I go, Ember's gone again to daycare. And I go, did you notice that on the days that Ember's at daycare, have you noticed that things are just a little bit easier? She goes, well, yeah, there's one less kid. I said, it's also quieter and calmer around here. I said, and so her husband had come out, and I said, have you noticed, you guys, you talk really loud? I was holding the baby, and she was asleep on my shoulder. Hey, Penny, how you doing? And the baby went, oh, and she's very long.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, not like Ember. Ember was tiny. This kid is as long as my son was, 22 and a half inches. So it's very long fingers, long. And they go, where did this come from? And I go, well, my father's side of the family's a lot like that. And she's very agitated and stuff. And I go, wait a minute. I said, guys, you guys are this is an intense, active household. And I don't know if this kid deals with that really well.
Is ready for that, yeah.
And my daughter goes, well, she's going to have to get used to it. I said, she's only 4 weeks old.
Give her a couple of weeks grace.
But then she brought out a product she was going to use with her first daughter, but her first daughter didn't need it. And it was called a nesting bean. And I had never seen anything like that. She goes, I thought maybe I was going to try this a little later when she was a little bit bigger, because she's long and thin. She's very narrow shoulders and she goes, but maybe I should try it. And it was like night and day. Oh my God. The little swaddling thing they had in it, and the weighted cushion. And it was the first night they got a decent night's sleep, where she only had to wake up once to feed her instead of 5 or 6 times, because the baby was waking itself up because it was constantly moving. It wouldn't stay swaddled, just like her brother wouldn't, because he was too long to fit in anything. And sometimes you have to have somebody else look at something, not because, and she was searching for everything. And she was talking and getting help from everybody. But sometimes it's just you're in the middle of it and you can't see this. And it's certainly not. The kid's still going to throw up. There are other issues they're going to have to deal with on that. But at least she's sleeping better.
Yep.
And because she was sleeping better, she was nursing better.
Yep.
And longer in between. And it's not that I know any differently. I think anybody else who would have walked in there and spent 3 days like that, I didn't end up spending long, but on the first 3 days, just sitting back and watching and going, what's different about this today?
Mm.
So no great knowledge base there, just being the person who had the time and the ability to be able to sit back for a minute and not be in the middle of it. Like she and her husband were constantly in the middle of it, worrying about what to do.
And Googling and getting served up.
Oh yeah, and getting lots and going to the doctor and doing this and that. And I always referring back to the delivery was a very difficult event and everything. So sometimes it's just, I didn't have all of that 4 weeks ahead of time to look at. I could only just see what I saw right there.
But also my previous experience was Amber didn't have any problems if I had a meat lover's pizza. There weren't any problems. You apply it to a business. Well, that's the way we've always done it. That's the way we did it last time and there weren't any problems. I'm like, well.
Some things have changed. So what in your business has changed? Maybe your client, your product, the processes that you're using, a new employee, just putting that extra infant in that family will change the dynamic. You know that you're dealing with.
Yeah. No, we're he's 4 months in, and actually we're 4 months in, and we're starting to get into a routine. So
it takes that
to get into, and you question everything, and sometimes it is somebody that you trust and whatnot coming in and having a look at things and to be like, oh, what about that? And as long as you're in a position to receive that sort of a message and hear that, then it's quite powerful. And I think, as I was sort of saying earlier, as we were introducing this episode, in my team, in my office, we go straight into solution mode. We say, oh, there's a problem. Let's fix it. Let's try and solve
dealing with the symptoms rather than the cause.
Yeah. And actually, that symptom or that particular problem, once you sort of take a step back and look out and take that step out, or someone else has a look at it for you, they can ask that question to be like, hey, but it feels like the input over here, is that right? Are we looking at the right thing? And what's the knock-on effect of it? So I think it is very much this symptoms versus causes. And quite often, particularly when you're looking at, okay, what's the problem? Let's fix that problem there. 9 times out of 10, you might put a sort of a Band-Aid over the top of it, but ultimately it still unravels in the fullness of time if you don't actually take that step back to have a look at the bigger picture.
Yeah. And that is sometimes difficult to do. And it's going to be very difficult for a lot of people to do right now in accounting who are dealing with a combination of bookkeeping, tax, audit, or tax or anything, because you got a lot of compliance stuff going on, got a lot of deadlines happening. But I find that if we don't take the time, and that's what our stand-up meetings are for. And that was something that when I was in India, I wanted to make sure that they understood, because I felt like in the stand-up meetings, what I was getting was let's just take care of today's symptoms. And Vidya was getting very happy with the fact that she could get through the meeting so quickly. And I said, this isn't about that. And this isn't
the 30-minute meeting had become a 10-minute meeting. So we're more efficient. We're back to billable.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. And for us, it's not billable. For them, it's just like we have tasks in front of us. And it's like, you can get out there and do those tasks, but if you're not doing them correctly, what the fuck good is it? Excuse me. But really, ladies.
And actually, my boss, she sort of said to me, is like, Damien, what do we need to do to essentially clear the calendars for 1 week to get rid of all of the shit meetings and all of that type of stuff? What are the real things we got to make sure we deliver next week? And let's get rid of everything else so that we can focus all of our attention and energy on really understanding this problem and solving this problem in a very short, focused sprint. Like a sprint of it, rather than trying to chip away at it over a period of sort of 3, 4, 5 months. Why don't we just really clear the calendars, get everyone focused on it, and see if we can come up with a solution, a solve in 5 working days, 10 working days, rather than spreading this solve out over over 12 weeks. And it was sort of just, again, an interesting way of thinking, and to be like, oh shit, can we do that? And she was like, of course, you can do whatever you want. If that solving this problem now and
If
treating,
it's an important enough problem.
yeah, treating the causes, yeah, and looking at those causes of the problem.
Because if you just cover up the symptoms, they're going to come back.
And it'll all unravel. Yeah, absolutely.
And then the other thing that happens is, and this happened again, like we kind of delved into that. Well, I was in India, and then Megan, who stayed, she added more to it.
Yep.
And things are getting better. Our stand-up reports are getting a lot more detailed. And also I made them also Zoom record them so I could watch them. And I'm going, yay, this is so much better. And yes, listen to all this information coming back and forth. And like Tavita said when you asked her, she said, hearing from other team leaders is helping me discover what I need to do better. Or how I could do things differently, or making her feel like, oh, I'm not alone in this. 2 days ago, we noticed watching the Zooms that they've changed it up and they're bringing them in one at a time now. And I'm going, okay, all right. I really like you to take your own initiative, but you just missed the boat on this one, because it's that sharing that allows them to say.
Was the reasoning because we turned a 20-minute meeting into a 7-minute meeting? Or
the meetings, although they got better, they only got 10 minutes longer.
Right.
But no, I have to find out. They've been busy with 1099s, and every night and morning we've been having meetings with clients. So I haven't been able to talk to them privately and ask them what was their reasoning for doing this. So before I tell them, hey, what happened to the whole team leader? I'm going to find out what was your reasoning for doing this?
Yeah.
It could be that because of the 1099s and the year-end closes we were doing, that there was just so much work on the table that they had to do that. I don't know. There could be a multitude of reasons why for 2 days they didn't do it that way, but I'm not going to jump on their shit till I find out what their reasoning.
But also,
and then I might find out I don't need to jump on this shit. They did the right thing, and they'll go back to the other way.
But also importantly, it was identified early.
Yes.
And sort of identified early and sort of flagged early. Whereas again, in tax season, if you don't have that sort of ability to step back, not to say that this is a mistake or whatever, but that same mistake can happen 2, 3, 4 weeks across 5, 10, 15 clients, because we don't have the time to actually take that step back and be like, oh, hang on, I've seen it once, I need to fix it now, rather than letting everything continue to go. So I think that's the other side of things, is when you do see a symptom, you can't let that symptom fly, or solve that individual symptom on that one particular client. You've got to take that step back to be like, okay, hang on, I've seen a mistake here. How do I stop it from happening for the next 15, 20, 30 clients that the team's working on? Also
in larger firms, I think what I've seen happen is that the mistake happens with this client and this team knows about it. We solved it with them. But the same mistake's happening over here with this other team. And so if you're not communicating that across the board. So I ran into it just like 2 nights ago, a CPA who we asked to do a tax return for an individual client that we had here in California. I sent her an email. I just said, hey, Beth, we're going to be closing out these 4 clients of yours that they're my clients, but you're doing the tax return on. And what do you need from me and my team to allow you to do the tax return better or quicker or more efficiently, whatever. And she sent me back several items that she would like to have done. Well, perfectly fine. Cool. So I knew they were busy with 1099s, and I could walk down the street and talk to the client. And so before I did, I thought I would just go in and check the books. And I just started going ballistic. And it was like, really? Come on. Why would you put that in uncategorized? We have 4 clients that have offices or businesses on the 101. They all flip and eat at the same restaurants. Why did that go into uncat? And it's like, and there were a couple others where they just Googled them. And yet we had that rule to do it, right? And why was it not done for that client? And I got an email response from the team leader. Oh, Penny, I'm so sorry. We won't let that happen again. And I'm going to go back to her and go, that's not good enough.
That's not an answer.
That's not an answer. And that's not a solution.
Yeah, that's not the answer.
I want to know why you think it happened.
Yeah.
Now, I have an idea of why it happened, but I want to know from her what she thinks.
Yeah.
And then we can discuss it. Because, and 3 of them, the client actually said, oh my God, I didn't tell you that. Oh, no wonder they were confused. Oh my God, yeah, of course. I mean, 3 of them were definitely where the client went, I didn't let you know that at all.
Yeah.
They were just 2 items, but it was enough for me to go, whoa, they should never have happened in the first place. And there are contingencies in place for this. So why weren't they utilized? And telling me it won't happen again is not an answer.
Yeah.
You have to tell me why they weren't utilized. Was it the person?
Yeah.
Was it the team leader? Was it just, I was in a hurry? That kind of thing. I mean, I need to know why.
Yeah. And I think again, you run a very tight ship in terms of process and tasks.
Yeah, and we still screw up every single day, like everybody else. Nothing's perfect.
Absolutely. But I think as well, you've got a very, again, because of the type of business that you run, as in you're that outsourced operation, you're very task workflow oriented, far more than in your own processes, far more than many accounting firms. And it's just that same thing of it's very easy to fix that one symptom, fix that one mistake just to keep the work moving.
Yeah.
Just to keep that client.
And then forget to go back and say, hey, where does this occur anywhere else?
And I guess that would be one of the topics in the daily stand-up. I noticed this happened here. Can we please make sure that the systems are right, the training's right, people are following, and it's flagged there, and then the entire team hears it. It's not, again, it's not just this one-on-one conversation with this one person that there was a particular issue. It's the entire team hears about it. The entire team is reminded about it and understands it and is responsible for resolving it across the business, not just that one individual.
And I think that's why they're going to the one-on-one again, because there are, at this time of year, more issues come up and they don't want to, typical of their culture, they want to keep it on the QT individual with each team leader. Well, that's nice, but that is not supportive of what we're trying to accomplish here.
Yeah.
You're going to just have to put your big girl panties on and deal with the fact that, hey, I got to fix a problem,
and that
not just cover up a symptom.
We've spoken a lot about that over different episodes, about building that culture of trust, and it is a very cultural thing in terms of the business culture. I mean, for somebody to put their hand up to say, "Yeah, I screwed up. I tried to get it done quickly before I got out and get out for the day. I missed that." So it is a quite cultural thing to develop that trust to say, "Yeah, I screwed up." We're very quick to flag when the bots screw up and we're very quick to jump up and down when the bots screw up. But it does take a really great culture to be able to put your hand up and say in front of other people, we screwed up, the buck stops with me and we're going to fix it. And I would really encourage, again, that I've gone into some firms where there is that great culture of personal accountability, trust, and everyone makes a mistake. It's when you sort of make the mistake 2 and 3 times that we realize something's wrong.
Well, yeah, and for us, we have to figure out who made the mistake.
Yeah.
And was it us? Was it the client firm, or was it the client firm's client? Because you've got, and I see this even with non-outsourced companies, it's like, oh, this bookkeeper did such a horrible job. We just got these books from this customer and they did a horrible job. I go, before you start getting angry at the prior bookkeeper and thinking that you're all this, why don't you run an audit trail and see who actually did the work? Because a lot of times we'll see the client come in and they've gone in and changed things. And of course, it seems like we did it. Or in the case of somebody who would say, we took over the books from another bookkeeping company and they just did a horrible job. Did they do the work? Did they really?
Or is it a horrible job? I mean, was it a horrible job, or was it just?
Or it was just not the way you would have done it.
Different to the way you do it. Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot of opportunity. There's not enough opportunity of time for this, and this is where the billable hourly rate issue comes into play. I got a call from a crying account manager while I was in Arizona. And I had to step out of the house and just like talk her down. And she goes, he came in and he's like, what's the bill? What's the hours on this? And I don't know what's going on. And where's everything going? And I go, what do you mean he doesn't know where anything's going on? You guys use a workflow. She goes, oh yeah, but he never logs into that. I said, so he's worried about the time and he's worried about your billable time, but he was willing to take an hour out of your day to have you explain to him something he could have easily looked up on the workflow. And you just took a goddamn hour out of my day.
Yeah. The knock-on effect of that is it's nuts, isn't it?
I said, he does that again. You tell him, call Penny.
And she'll train you on how to access that workflow.
Exactly. The dashboard that tells you this is where it's worked on. This is what's been done. This is what's in progress.
And this is what's still to come. Yeah. It's
So you pay for it. Why not use it? Oh my.
Yeah. I know. It's such a good point, is it? That the whole purpose of these workflow tools is to give firm owners, managers, partners, et cetera, visibility into where projects are and the ability to manage work wherever, whenever. But if you're not actually going to take the time to get in and understand how the tool works, then shame on you in many respects, because you can't just be like, well, that's not my job. I just walk down the hall and ask someone to explain it to me. I'm like, no, that's not how it works today.
No, not and then get on their case because they missed an hour
exactly.
billable. And when she called me, it sounded like she was worried about at billable time. So I looked at her and I go, you guys are like maxing out all the time being used. If you have a complaint on that, tell me. And she goes, no, we're not complaining about that. He just wants the details. I said, we give it to him every week. She goes, oh, yeah, but he doesn't look at it. He comes to me to have me explain it to him. I'm going, all right.
What's the symptom? What's the cause?
Okay, the cause is, I'm sorry, Mr. CPA,
Yes, yeah. So I think, like, as we sort of think about this idea of symptoms and causes, we are in coming into, I was going to say tax season is ramping up. Look, with 1099s and all that type of stuff, tax season is, and the tax planning that happens prior to the end of year, we're in the thick of it. How do we help, or what are some ideas for firm leaders, managers, to be able to take that step back to help identify those, the root cause of problems rather than just dealing with the symptoms? What do you think on that? Obviously, we talked about the daily stand-up and the role of that. What are some other things you're seeing in firms around the country?
Well, I think the good ones, they have somebody who is not in the thick of it.
Yeah.
Who is kind of like going around and going, okay, where are the blocks here? Where are the blocks here? And they're taking note of it. Having that person, those people, that's very successful. And we have quite a few firms that have that. And they are more successful, at least from our standpoint, because they utilize us more. And we're consistently busy with them.
That's not necessarily the firm administrator, because I think firm administrator, and maybe it's a blended role, but the firm administrator is more often the paying the bills and all that type of stuff of the office and running the office and that type of stuff. It's unless that firm administrator is trained on how to understand the workflow and use the workflow, they can't be lumped with that job, can they? That they've got to make sure they know how those workflow tools and everything work. If you do want them to become that true operations type member of the team, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you've got the tools. If you've got people trained on the tools, certainly make the drudgery work, the day-to-day data entry type stuff go away. So there has to be another aspect of a personality that can say, okay, I've got this time. What can I do during the time that I'm not doing that data entry and I find it very helpful that if everybody writes their process down, I'll write down what I do, you write down what you do, and then let's just hand this stuff back and forth. And I'm going to follow your instructions for you, and you follow your instructions that I give myself. And let's see if we can both figure it out. Or let's see where we disagree, or let's see where each of us might have a better ask point. And then get together and say, let's make one process for this, because ultimately the job we're doing is the same and the outcome we want is the same, but we're approaching it differently. And what can we do to make it one system across the board? Because we want to put a third one of me in here because we want to bring on more clients. And I don't want a third process, right? But I can't give them the process I have because I don't have an agreement between two people who have two different ways of approaching something. Just like a bookkeeper where you got a bookkeeper, or even a tax preparer. Like we were talking to a new client last night and I said, so using Excel spreadsheets. And he goes, well, yeah, we're dealing with 5 account managers and each of them has their own Excel spreadsheets on how they track their work, how they prioritize it. And they're going, so it's like you have 5 different companies
under the one roof,
under the one roof. And he goes, I never thought about it that way. I go, is there any reason why we can't use one and we can all come to agreement? And he goes, well, I'd have to talk to them. So he's going to have to deal with egos. I go, oh.
I'll have to talk to them. I mean,
I said, you know what? We're going to get through this over the next 4 months. It's going to be touch and go. It's going to be problematic. We're going to have to spend more time watching it. And that's going to be added to you guys. Just so you know, it may not be bookkeeping and accounting and tax work, but it is our time. And I said, and come the end of April and the beginning of May, you and I can sit down and maybe look at how we can get this into one system across everybody in your firm. He goes, wouldn't that be lovely?
Yeah. And shame on you for not getting it solved in the downtime, sort of in the summer or
why did you wait till now? Yeah.
Because that, and what I think, if sort of listeners are thinking, you know what, that sounds a lot like my firm, I would recommend that you flag it with your team now and recognize that it's a problem and that post-tax season, we're going to solve it or we're going to work to try and solve it, because I can almost guarantee you there will be a gross level of dissatisfaction within the team. There will be frustration in the team. If across 3 or 4 different partners, there's 3 or 4 different expectations about how work gets done, that will put in immense stress on the team, and turnover. Quitting is a real issue that you might have to face. If you're listening and you're like, shit, that is us, identify it now. Talk to the team to say, we know it's a problem. We're going to try and fix it. But at least if you acknowledge the cause of the problem, maybe that might give the team some sort of a better understanding of like, okay, so they know it's a problem. We're going to try and work to fix it. I can knuckle down and work through tax season, because I think that's a big issue when different processes in a business for the same outcome, it just sets the team up to fail.
And if I'm gonna do this again next year, fuck it, I'm not doing it. I'm just not gonna do it. And then they leave. This young lady that had called me about her boss spending an hour, like she was thinking of dropping out of accounting. And when I had seen her a couple of months ago, and she goes, I thought I was going to become a CPA, but I don't want to become this person that I see that I'm working for. She's only 27. She's and I said, don't let what you see in front of you keep you from being the change that you can do.
Yeah. And there are amazing firms out there that are doing amazing things for their team, for their clients, etc. So I'd agree with that. I think my final comment on this idea of symptoms and causes, one of the things that I notice is when I go into a lot of firms, and I know you do this a lot as well, Penny, where you just sort of sit in the WIP meeting as that observer. What I find really interesting is the administrators aren't in the WIP meetings. Yep. And going back to that idea of what's the skill set of our administrator and how do we leverage that skill set to help us move work through, to help unblock bottlenecks or whatever it is. I don't think firms are embracing the skill set of their employee base as a whole. And so I would sort of say, again, how do we help firm owners and managers step back and treat some of the causes, bring other people into those meetings, bring the administrators into the meetings, broaden the meetings so that you hopefully can tap into other people's experiences where they can say, actually, you know what, at another firm we did this, or alternatively, did you know that the software that we have does X? And I can run a training session on Thursday to bring the team up to speed on how to better manage tasks.
Keeping up with changes in software, you definitely need somebody full time. But also the other thing too is the administration's people are often the ones who are talking to the clients.
Yep. Yeah.
And they might have a different aspect.
Have an insight or two. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So it's not a bad thing. In fact, I had asked them to put our office administrator in these meetings. And I noticed that she doesn't go to all of them. And I think that she could help them a little bit more and in understanding their needs better if she was in the meeting. So that's the other thing I'm going to bring up.
But actually, even sort of you go back to that WIP meeting, and one of the really important people in the meeting that I joined there was the person, the training person.
Sweater, yeah. Yeah,
and same type of thing. You go into a lot of WIP meetings and the administration team's not there. The training or the technology or training team's not there. And so you're probably going to be diving in to treat symptoms Whereas the administration team, the technology or training team, the accounting team, that's probably going to enable you to step back and have a look at the causes of the problem rather than just trying to put a Band-Aid on and a short-term fix to get that work out the door and through to back to the client. Yeah, I think there's a lot of
And I also made a mistake that I want to correct with them too. And that is that because we want to be paperless and show that we don't use pen and paper, one of the things is I've told them to stop taking paper notes and to type them in to the Confluence. And I've been doing a lot of reading on that after I established that. And I found that regardless of how modern we are and how hooked we are into these little cell phones and stuff, that when you put pen to paper, I had a teacher once in high school who said, if you read something and you say something and you write something, it's in your head. You got it.
Yeah.
And I think I'm going to ask them to stop bringing notepads back into the conference room. I mean, they can't take them out and use them on the floor, obviously, but they can use them in the training room and they can use them in their stand-up meetings.
And you know what, that's sort of it's just chicken scratch. But I think you're right. If I'm, and I've tried to do this as well, tried to go paperless, but if I'm trying to type it in as I'm going, the red little squiggly line comes up and I've got to go back and fix it, backspace, right click to spell check.
Yeah. Oh my God. You get so hooked into the computer telling you spelled that wrong. You know, something. Or you didn't put a comma in there or anything. And what really prompted it for me, and I'm gonna give a shout out to the guys at Accounting Salon. They did I was getting on the plane to fly home from Tucson, and they did a session showing the difference between Zapier and Make, which is, you know what Zapier and Make do.
I know what Zapier is.
And Make does the same thing. And one of them liked the way Zapier worked, and the other one liked the way Make worked. And when you see them on the screen, I immediately went, oh, I know why I would like Make better. Because it goes west to east. It goes the way my eyes track when I'm reading, whereas Zapier is very linear.
Yeah. Oh,
and that reminded me too that as a teacher, I had to teach kids who have different learning modalities because I was in special ed, and it was like how does this particular person take information in, and what's the best way for them to do it? And I took away a tool that they had relied on through most of their life and bad on me. And now I got to bring it back in and say, I made a mistake, ladies. Yeah. So
we all make mistakes. And it's about recognizing that and putting your hand up in a trusting environment to say, I made a mistake, and let's get back to the pen and paper.
It helped them. Yeah. So anyways, that's it. I'm going to go back to the rain in San Diego.
Back to the rain.
And then head over to Wyoming and maybe
into
get
the
some
snow. And away you go. Well, Penny, today's conversation has been fascinating. It is, again, the things that happen to us in a day-to-day life, raising kids and families and all that type of stuff. It's the same stuff that happens in businesses. And what can we learn from each? And how do we apply lessons? But I think also, how do either you take a step back from the daily grind to work out how to work smarter or fix some of the causes of problems, or alternatively invite someone in to have a look, to be a fly on the wall. And I know, Penny, you do a lot of that. I do a lot of that from a consulting perspective. So if you are listening and you'd like some advice or some thoughts, or fly to come in and sit, maybe that's the wrong analogy, for someone to come in and join those WIP meetings and sort of just identify a couple of ideas, please do get in touch. So Penny, they can find you at moneypennyllc.com.
Yep. All LinkedIn.
Exactly. And myself or Penny on LinkedIn, please don't hesitate to reach out, connect with us, send us a message. We'd love to talk. Listeners, if you have enjoyed today's episode, please share it with your network. Please like it. Please give it a rating. And if you've got any things that you'd like us to discuss on the podcast, get in touch.
Yeah.
Penny, it's a pleasure. We'll talk to you next week.
Bye-bye.